Hello, friend. Welcome to Science for Sleep. Whether you're returning tonight or just finding this channel for the first time, this is a quiet place to slow down, learn something gentle, and let the day gradually fall away. Tonight, we are going to rest with one of the most familiar fruits in the world, an apple. It may be sitting in a bowl on a kitchen counter. It may be tucked into a lunch bag. It may be red and glossy, green and sharp, pale yellow, deep pink, or streaked with thin lines of color like a tiny painted planet. At first, an apple feels simple. Round, smooth, sweet, and easy to hold. But apples are not just one thing. There are tiny crab apples no bigger than cherries. There are large baking apples that soften in the oven. There are crisp apples that snap loudly when bitten. There are softer apples that break apart gently. There are sweet apples, sour apples, cider apples, pie apples, and apples that taste almost floral, honey-like, grassy, or spicy. Around the world, people have grown thousands of apple varieties. More than 7,500 kinds are often named, though most grocery stores only show a small group. That small group is chosen because those apples can travel well, store well, look familiar, and stay firm long enough to reach the shelf. So the apple most people know is only a small doorway into a much larger orchard. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, you're welcome to subscribe. And if it feels natural, to leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. It helps others find their way to this calm corner of the world, one sleepy traveler at a time. Even the colors of apples are part of their hidden science. A red apple is not red by accident. Its skin can hold pigments called anthocyanins. These are the same kinds of plant pigments that help give color to blueberries, red cabbage, cherries, and many autumn leaves. A green apple holds more of its green color from chlorophyll, the same pigment that helps leaves catch light. Yellow apples can show more carotenoids, plant pigments also found in foods like carrots and corn. So when an apple rests in the hand, its color is not just decoration. It is chemistry made visible. It is the tree's life showing through the skin of the fruit. Some apples turn red only where sunlight reaches them. One side may glow brighter than the other because that side faced more light while it grew on the branch. The shaded side may stay paler, almost like the apple kept a soft memory of where it hung in the tree. And beneath that skin is even more variety. One apple may be full of juice and crunch. Another may be dry and mild. One may taste bright and tart because it holds more malic acid, the main acid that gives apples their sharp bite. Another may taste sweet because its sugars are stronger than its sourness. This is why biting into a green Granny Smith feels so different from biting into a sweet Fuji or a crisp Honeycrisp. They are all apples, but each one carries a slightly different balance of cells, water, sugar, acid, scent, and skin. And this is where the apple begins to feel less ordinary, because something so common can still hold surprise. A fruit seen every day can carry a world of color, chemistry, farming, weather, storage, and history. It can sit quietly in a bowl, looking simple, while holding the story of thousands of varieties behind it. And at the center of that fruit, hidden behind the sweet flesh, is the small, dark core. Inside that core are seeds. And those seeds reveal something even stranger. Because the apple is not only a food, it is a seed carrier. It is a quiet little structure built by a tree to protect the next generation. The sweetness, the color, the scent, and the crisp bite all led inward toward that hidden purpose. The fruit draws attention. The seeds wait inside. And the simple apple in the hand begins to open into a much older story. The apple rests quietly on the outside. Smooth skin, firm flesh, a gentle scent that may be sweet, sharp, or almost floral. But the real center of the apple is not the part most people notice first. It is the core. That small, pale, slightly tougher space hidden inside the fruit. If an apple is sliced straight down from stem to base, the core appears as a narrow column. But if it is sliced across the middle, a small star shape often appears. 5 points, arranged around the center. Inside those spaces are the seeds. Most apples hold about 5 seed chambers, and each chamber may hold 1 or 2 seeds. That means a single apple often carries several small brown seeds, each one tucked safely inside the fruit like a quiet beginning. The tree does not make the apple only to be beautiful. It does not make it only to be sweet. In biology, fruit has a purpose. A fruit protects seeds while they develop. Then, when the fruit is ripe, it helps those seeds move away from the parent plant. This is true for many fruits. A cherry carries a hard pit. A peach wraps soft flesh around a large stone. A tomato holds many small seeds in wet chambers. An apple does something similar, but in its own careful way. The edible flesh surrounds the core, making the seed safer, while the apple grows on the branch. The skin helps guard the fruit from drying out too quickly. The flesh offers water, sugar, scent, and color. And together, these parts make the apple noticeable to animals. Long before apples sat in grocery stores, wild apples grew in forests and along hillsides. There, the ripe fruit could fall to the ground. A deer might eat it. A bear might bite into it. Birds, foxes, horses, and other animals could carry pieces away. Some seeds might pass through an animal and land somewhere new, surrounded by a little natural fertilizer. Not every seed would survive. Most would not. But plants do not need every seed to grow. They only need enough chances, spread across enough seasons, for life to continue. That is part of what makes the apple so interesting. It is food, but it is also a vehicle. It is sweetness built around possibility. And every seed inside it carries a new mix of genetic material. That means each seed is not a perfect copy of the apple it came from. It is more like a new child from 2 parents. One part comes from the tree that grew the apple. The other part comes from the pollen that reached the flower before the fruit began to form. This is why planting a seed from a sweet red apple does not promise another sweet red apple. The seed may grow into a tree with fruit that is smaller, sharper, softer, greener, or very different from the apple that held it. Inside one ordinary core, there may be several possible futures. Each seed is small, hard, and quiet. But hidden inside is an embryo, which is the young plant at its earliest stage. There is also stored food to help it begin, and a seed coat that helps protect it, until conditions are right. Moist soil, cool seasons, warmth, light, time, and chance all matter. A seed is not just a speck. It is a paused tree. It is a life waiting for the right moment to start. And this changes the way the apple feels. The flesh is no longer just a snack. The sweetness is no longer just flavor. The crisp bite, the scent, the color, and the round shape all belong to a larger plan. They make the fruit attractive. They protect what is hidden. They help the seeds travel beyond the shade of the tree that made them. So the apple in the hand is both an ending and a beginning. It is the finished fruit of one season. And it is also a small container of possible trees. But before there can be a core, before there can be seeds, before there can be sweetness heavy enough to bend a branch, there must first be something much softer. A pale flower opening in spring. Before the apple was firm enough to hold, it was almost weightless. Not round, not crisp, not sweet. It began as a flower. In spring, apple trees wake slowly from their winter rest. The bare branches first show tiny buds, tight and closed, often reddish or silver-gray on the outside. Inside those buds, the future flowers are folded in miniature. As the days grow warmer and the tree receives enough light and heat, the buds begin to swell. Green tips appear. Then small clusters form. Then the blossoms open, one by one, until the orchard changes from dark branches to a soft cloud of pale petals. Most apple blossoms have 5 petals. They are usually white, pale pink, or pink at the edges while still opening. A single flower may look delicate enough to be only decoration, but it is already arranged with purpose. At the center of the blossom are the parts that can become seeds and fruit. There are thin stalks called stamens, which carry pollen. Pollen is the fine powder made by flowers that carries male reproductive cells. In an apple blossom, pollen forms on tiny tips called anthers. Near the center is the pistil, the female part of the flower. At the top of the pistil is a sticky surface called the stigma. Its job is to catch pollen. Below it is the style, a narrow passage. Deeper down is the ovary, where seeds can begin to form if pollination succeeds. The words may sound technical, but the shape is simple to picture. A pale flower opens. Fine yellow pollen rests on small tips around the center. A sticky surface waits in the middle. And hidden at the base of the flower is the place where the future apple may begin. An orchard in bloom can look soft, almost dreamy. Rows of trees stand under spring light, covered in white and pink flowers. The air may smell faintly sweet. Bees may move through the branches. Petals may loosen and drift down like quiet snow. But beneath that peaceful scene, a precise biological process is beginning. Each blossom is a possibility, not a promise. A mature apple tree may open thousands of flowers in one season. But not every flower becomes a full apple. Some never receive the right pollen. Some are damaged by cold nights. Some are thinned naturally by the tree later when it cannot support every young fruit. This is why bloom time matters so much. In many apple-growing regions, bloom lasts only about 1 to 2 weeks. A late frost during that short window can injure the soft flower tissue. If the temperature drops low enough after blossoms open, the center of the flower can be damaged, and the apple that might have formed there may never grow. The orchard may still look beautiful from a distance, but inside some blossoms, the future fruit has already been lost. That is part of the quiet risk of spring. The apple depends on timing. It depends on warmth arriving after winter. It depends on flowers opening when pollinators are active. It depends on the soft parts of the blossom surviving long enough to do their work. And it depends on pollen reaching the right place. A flower can hold all the pieces needed to begin, but those pieces must meet. The pollen on the stamen has to reach the sticky stigma. From there, it must grow a tiny tube down through the style toward the ovary. That tube is too small to see with the eye, but it is the path that allows fertilization to happen. Fertilization means the male and female cells join, creating the first stage of a seed. Only then can the flower fully begin its change into fruit. So the apple starts not with heaviness, but with a fragile opening. A brief bloom, a pale flower holding a hidden design. It is easy to see an orchard in spring and think only of beauty, but every blossom is also a test. A soft structure waiting for contact. A small arrangement of petals, pollen, and living tissue that must succeed before sweetness can ever gather. The apple does not begin as food. It begins as a chance. And for that chance to become fruit, something must move through the blossoms and carry life from one flower to another. The flower cannot finish this work alone. It can open its petals. It can hold its pollen. It can offer nectar near its center. But the pollen still has to move. For many apple trees, this movement must happen between different varieties. A tree may bloom with thousands of flowers, but its own pollen is often not enough to make a strong crop. Many apples are self-incompatible, which means pollen from the same variety does not fertilize the flower well. A honeycrisp tree, for example, usually needs pollen from a different compatible apple variety nearby. A Gala, Fuji, Macintosh, Golden Delicious, or another suitable tree may help, depending on the orchard plan. This is why orchards are often planted with more than one kind of apple. The trees may look like simple rows from a distance, but hidden inside those rows is a careful pattern of bloom timing and pollen matching. The flowers need a partner, and they need that partner to be open at the same time. If one tree blooms too early and the other blooms too late, the pollen cannot do its quiet work. In the soft middle of spring, timing becomes everything. Bees are the main helpers in many apple orchards. Honeybees are often brought in by beekeepers during bloom. Growers may place hives near the orchard so the bees can move through the flowers while the window is still open. A honeybee visits blossoms looking for nectar, the sweet liquid made by flowers, and pollen, the powdery material that bees collect as food. As the bee moves from flower to flower, grains of pollen cling to its fuzzy body. Some of that pollen brushes onto the sticky stigma of another blossom. A single visit may be enough to begin the process, but a flower often benefits from several visits. The more complete the pollination, the better the seeds may develop. And the better the seeds develop, the more evenly the young apple may grow. A poorly pollinated apple can become small, misshapen, or drop from the tree early, so the shape of a future apple can begin with tiny pollen grains moved on the body of an insect. Other pollinators can help too. Bumblebees can fly in cooler weather than honeybees. Some wild bees, including mason bees, can be very effective apple pollinators because they move quickly between flowers and carry pollen loosely on their bodies. Flies and other insects may visit blossoms as well, but no matter which creature carries the pollen, the work must happen during a short span of bloom. Often, an orchard has only several good days when enough flowers are open, the weather is mild, and pollinators are active. A cold rain can keep bees inside the hive. Strong wind can make flying harder. Heavy rain can wash pollen from blossoms or make flowers less inviting. A late frost can damage the center of the flower, even if the petals still look pale and pretty from far away. The danger is quiet because the result does not always show at once. An orchard may bloom beautifully in April or May. The branches may look full of promise. But if the cold came at the wrong hour, or the bees could not fly on the best days, the harvest may be smaller in late summer or autumn. Months can pass before the full effect of those few spring days is clear. This makes an apple feel more delicate than it first seemed. The fruit that eventually rests in a hand began with a narrow chance. A blossom had to open. Compatible pollen had to be nearby. A bee or another pollinator had to arrive. The weather had to allow movement. The living parts of the flower had to remain unharmed. And all of this had to happen before the petals browned, loosened, and fell. After pollination succeeds, the flower begins to change. The petals are no longer the center of the story. They fade and drop away. The small base of the blossom remains on the branch. There, almost hidden beneath where the petals once opened, the first shape of the apple begins to swell. After the petals fall, the branch looks quieter. The bright flower that once opened to the bees is no longer the part that catches the eye. A few pale petals may cling for a short time. The stamens dry and darken. The soft color fades. But at the base of the flower, something important remains. A tiny green swelling begins to hold its place on the stem. This is where the apple starts to become visible. At first, it is not round like the fruit in a bowl. It may look like a small green bead, no wider than a fingernail. The dried remains of the flower may still sit at its end. That little tuft at the bottom of a mature apple is a trace of the blossom it used to be. It is one of the quiet signs that an apple was once a flower. After pollination and fertilization, the flower receives a signal to keep growing. Fertilization means that the pollen has joined with the egg cells inside the flower, beginning the formation of seeds. As the young seeds begin to develop, they help send chemical signals through the surrounding tissue. Those signals encourage the flower base to grow into fruit. The apple is now forming around its future core. But an apple is not quite like a peach, a plum, or a cherry. Those fruits are often built around one main ovary, with a hard pit inside. An apple belongs to a group called pome fruits. A pome fruit is a fruit where much of the edible flesh comes from tissue around the ovary. not just from the ovary itself. Pears are pome fruits too. So are quinces. In an apple, the papery core is closer to the true ovary tissue. The crisp white flesh around it grows mostly from the flower base, sometimes called the receptacle. That means the part people usually eat is not simply the seed chamber. It is the enlarged support structure of the old flower. The blossom does not just make a fruit, it becomes rearranged into one. This is why the apple's shape still carries flower geometry. Many apples show 5 seed chambers inside. The star in the middle of a crosswise slice is a memory of the flower's 5-part pattern. The same number that appeared in the 5 petals can still be seen hidden in the core. As the young apple grows, 2 main changes happen. First, cells divide. 1 cell becomes 2. 2 become 4. 4 become many more. This early stage helps build the basic size and structure of the fruit. Then, after many cells have formed, those cells begin to expand. They take in water. They stretch. They fill more space. This swelling is a major reason the apple becomes round, firm, and heavy. A mature apple is mostly water. In many apples, water makes up around 80 to 85% of the fruit. That water does not just sit loosely inside. It fills millions of tiny plant cells, helping create the pressure that makes a fresh apple feel firm. When the cells are full, the apple has tension. It resists the fingers slightly when squeezed. Later, that same cell pressure will help give the apple its crisp bite. But during this early stage, the fruit is still small and vulnerable. The tree may produce more young apples than it can support. In early summer, many apple trees naturally drop some of their small fruits. Growers sometimes call this June drop, though the timing depends on the region and weather. It is the tree's way of reducing the load. A branch cannot always feed every fruit that begins. Some tiny apples yellow, loosen, and fall to the ground. Others remain attached and keep growing. The ones that stay become stronger sinks for the tree's resources. A sink is a growing part of a plant that draws in food and water. The young apple becomes one of those hungry places. It needs minerals from the soil. It needs water pulled upward through the roots and trunk. It needs sugars made by the leaves. The flower has done its part. The first swelling has begun. But the fruit cannot make itself sweet from nothing. Every gram of crisp flesh must be built slowly from the work of the whole tree. Above it, leaves are spreading in the light, quietly making the food that will fill the apple from the inside. Above the small growing apple, the leaves open wider into the light. They may look still from a distance, thin green shapes resting along the branch. But each leaf is busy in a quiet, steady way. Its surface is built to catch sunlight. Inside the leaf are tiny structures called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts hold chlorophyll, the green pigment that helps plants absorb light. That same chlorophyll gives apple leaves their deep summer color. With sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide from the air, the leaf begins the process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis simply means making food from light. The leaf takes in carbon dioxide through tiny openings on its surface called stomata. These openings are so small they cannot be seen without a microscope. They can open and close, helping the leaf balance its need for air with its need to avoid losing too much water. Water rises into the leaf from the roots, traveling up through the trunk and branches in long tubes of plant tissue. Then, using energy from sunlight, the leaf rearranges carbon dioxide and water into sugar. Oxygen is released back into the air. The sugar stays with the plant. This is one of the quietest and most important exchanges on Earth. Light touches a leaf. Air enters through tiny pores. Water arrives from the soil, and a tree begins to build sweetness out of things that seem almost weightless. The first sugar made in photosynthesis is often simple, but the tree can change it into other forms. It can use sugar right away for growth. It can store some energy as starch. It can move sugar to places that need it. A growing apple is one of those places. The fruit is a strong draw on the tree's food supply. As it swells, it receives sugars through living tissue called phloem. Phloem is like a slow inner delivery system. It carries dissolved sugars from the leaves to growing parts of the plant, including young fruits, roots, and new shoots. So the sweetness inside an apple does not begin inside the apple. It begins in the leaves. The apple is being fed from above. Every day, when the weather is warm enough and the leaves are healthy, more sugar can move toward the fruit. Some of that sugar helps the apple grow. Some becomes part of the flavor. Some remains dissolved in the juice held inside the cells. This is why sunlight matters so much to fruit quality. An apple that grows in good light often develops stronger color and better sweetness. Growers sometimes prune apple trees to open the canopy, which means they remove selected branches so light can reach more of the fruit and leaves. In a crowded tree, shaded apples may stay paler or less sweet. In a well-shaped tree, sunlight can touch more of the fruit surface. One side of an apple may even turn redder than the other, because that side faced the sun more directly. The apple carries a map of its own position on the branch. The brighter cheek may tell where the light found it. The paler side may tell where leaves cast shade. Even the sweetness inside is shaped by this quiet exposure. But sunlight alone is not enough. The tree also needs water. During dry weeks, the roots must pull moisture from the soil and send it upward. If water is limited, fruit growth can slow. If too much water arrives suddenly after drought, some fruits may crack or swell unevenly. The apple depends on balance. Not too dry, not too wet. Enough leaves, enough light. Enough time for sugar to gather. As the weeks pass, the small green fruit becomes heavier. Its cells expand. Its skin stretches. Its flesh fills with water, acid, sugar, and scent compounds that are still developing. The apple is slowly becoming something an animal might notice. Something bright, something fragrant, something worth biting. And yet, all of this is happening through the tree. The apple does not catch sunlight by itself. It does not reach into the soil by itself. It is held in place while the rest of the tree works around it. Leaves gather light. Roots gather water. Branches hold the fruit in the open air. The trunk carries materials upward and downward. The sweetness in the apple is not separate from the whole living body that made it. A bite of apple is partly stored sunlight, partly lifted water, partly air changed into sugar, and partly the patient work of a tree that has been building toward this fruit since spring. The fruit is growing now, but its story is still larger than sweetness. To understand one apple fully, the whole tree has to come into view. The apple hangs from a branch, but it belongs to the whole tree. It is not separate from the roots below it. It is not separate from the trunk that holds it. It is not separate from the leaves that gather light around it. Every fruit is connected to a living system that stretches in two directions at once, up into the air, down into the soil. Beneath the ground, apple roots spread outward and downward, searching for water and dissolved minerals. Some roots are thick and woody, helping anchor the tree in place. Others are fine and pale, almost hair-like, built for absorbing what the tree needs. These tiny root tips take in water from the soil. They also absorb minerals such as nitrogen, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. Each one has a job. Nitrogen helps build leaves and new growth. Potassium helps with sugar movement and fruit quality. Calcium helps strengthen cell walls, including the cell walls inside the apple itself. When calcium is too low in the fruit, some apples can develop storage problems such as bitter pit, where small brown spots form beneath the skin. So even a mark on an apple can begin with something quiet happening in the soil. From the roots, water travels upward through the tree in tissue called xylem. Xylem is made of long, narrow tubes. It carries water from the roots into the trunk, then into the branches, then out toward the leaves and fruit. The movement is helped by evaporation from the leaves. As water leaves through tiny pores, more water is pulled upward behind it, like a slow chain rising through the tree. A tall apple tree may lift water several meters into the air without a pump, using the pull created by its own leaves. In the other direction, sugars move through tissue called phloem. The leaves make sugars through photosynthesis, and the phloem carries those sugars to growing places. A young apple, a new shoot, a root that needs stored energy. The tree is always moving materials, even though it looks still. Water rises, sugar travels, minerals spread, and the fruit receives what it needs from every part of the tree's body. The trunk is the main column holding this movement together. On the outside is bark. Bark may look rough, cracked, or grey-brown, especially on older apple trees. But it is not just a covering. It protects the living layers underneath from drying, cold, insects, and disease. If bark is damaged badly enough all the way around the trunk, the tree can suffer because the sugar-moving layer beneath it may be cut off. This kind of injury is called girdling. It can happen when animals chew bark in winter, when tools damage the trunk, or when something tight wraps around the tree for too long. Under the bark is cambium, a thin living layer that makes new wood and new inner bark. Each growing season, the tree adds more wood. Year by year, the trunk thickens. Inside older wood, faint rings can record seasons of growth, wider in good years and narrower in harder years. An apple tree is not just making fruit in the present. It is carrying memory in its wood. It also stores energy. In late summer and autumn, after the fruit has grown, the tree can move sugars into roots, trunk, and branches. Some of that energy is stored as starch. Starch is a storage form of sugar, like a packed-away food supply. During winter, the tree appears bare and quiet. Its leaves are gone. Its branches stand still in cold air. But inside, it is not dead. It is resting. When spring returns, the tree uses stored energy to open buds, grow new leaves, and support the first flowers before the leaves are fully ready to make food again. This means an apple blossom in spring is partly supported by the work of the year before. The fruit of one season depends on sunlight from another. The tree is a long conversation between past and present. A branch that holds apples in September began preparing months earlier. The roots that feed the fruit may have grown years earlier. The trunk that lifts water may have added layer after layer through storms, winters, dry spells, and warm summers. So the apple is not just an object on a stem. It is the endpoint of roots, bark, leaves, stored energy, moving water, and patient growth. And once the whole tree comes into view, the story begins to stretch even farther back. Because this living system did not begin in a modern orchard. Long before rows of apple trees were planted by human hands, apples grew wild in mountain forests far from the grocery store shelf. Not behind fences, not in straight lines, not chosen for shine, size, or sweetness. They grew among grasses, shrubs, birds, insects, bears, deer, and changing weather. Many modern apples trace an important part of their ancestry to a wild species called Malus sieversii. It still grows in parts of Central Asia, especially near the Tian Shan Mountains of Kazakhstan. The name Tian Shan means heavenly mountains, and the range stretches across a huge part of Central Asia, with snowy peaks, deep valleys, and forests that can survive cold winters and dry summers. In these mountain regions, wild apple trees did not all look the same. Some produced small hard fruit. Some produced apples closer to the size of familiar orchard apples. Some were red, some were yellow, some were green, some were striped or blotched. Some tasted sweet. Some were sour, bitter, dry, soft, crisp, fragrant, or strange. A person walking through a wild apple forest could find more variety in a short distance than in many grocery stores. One tree might hold fruit that tastes sharp and almost lemony. Another might carry apples with a honey scent. Another might produce fruit that is rough, tannic, and unpleasant to eat fresh. Tannic means it creates that dry, puckering feeling in the mouth, like strong tea or some cider apples. This wide range mattered. In the wild, there was no single perfect apple. There were only apples that survived well enough to keep growing. Some trees survived cold better. Some handled drought better. Some resisted insects or disease. Some made fruit that animals noticed and carried away. Others dropped fruit near their own roots, where only a few seeds had a chance. The forest selected quietly, season after season. A late frost might damage one tree's blossoms, while another tree bloomed a little later and escaped. A dry summer might weaken shallow roots, while another tree reached deeper moisture. An insect might feed heavily on one kind of fruit, while another fruit's thicker skin gave it a little more protection. In this way, wild apples were shaped by pressure, not preference. They were shaped by weather, animals, fungi, soil, altitude, and chance. A wild apple forest is not like a modern orchard. A modern orchard is planned. Trees may be grafted onto chosen rootstocks. Branches are pruned. Pollinator varieties are placed with care. Fruit is thinned, sprayed, picked, sorted, stored, and shipped. But a wild apple forest is older and rougher. Branches twist in different directions. Fruit falls and ferments on the ground. Seeds sprout where animals leave them. Young trees compete for light. Old trees crack, hollow, and still bloom again in spring. The city of Almaty in Kazakhstan is often linked to apples. Its older name is commonly connected with the word for apple, and the region has long been known for wild apple ancestry. The idea is beautiful in a simple way. A modern apple resting on a table may carry a long memory of mountain forests near a place whose name itself points back to fruit. And those forests were not just background scenery. They were living libraries. Each wild tree held genes, which are the instructions living things pass down. Some of those genes helped create the apples people later carried, planted, crossed, and selected. When humans began choosing better fruit, they were not starting from nothing. They were choosing from a forest already full of possibilities. The crisp apple in a bowl, the tart green apple in a pie, the sweet red apple in a lunch bag. All of them belong to a story that reaches back through wild trees, with uneven branches and fruit scattered on mountain soil. The apple did not begin as a polished supermarket fruit. It began as a forest fruit, varied, imperfect, resilient, and alive with chance. And once people found those fruits, tasted them, carried them, and planted their seeds, the apple began to travel far beyond the mountains that shaped it. Once apples left the wild forest, they did not travel in only one way. They moved slowly, seed by seed, branch by branch, mouth by mouth. A ripe apple could be eaten by an animal, carried away from the parent tree, and leave its seeds in a new place. A person could taste a fruit, keep the seeds, and plant them near a home, a camp, or a field. A traveler could carry dried apples as food. A farmer could bring young trees or cuttings to a new village. In this way, the apple began to move across land with both animals and people. It was not a fast journey. It unfolded over centuries. From Central Asia, apples followed human movement westward and eastward. They traveled with traders, herders, soldiers, farmers, and families. They moved through valleys, across dry plains, over mountain passes, and into towns where people planted useful trees near homes and roads. One of the most important routes was the Silk Road. This was not one single road, but a wide network of trade paths connecting East Asia, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. For more than 1,000 years, silk, spices, glass, paper, horses, ideas, and crops moved along these routes. Apples moved too. A fruit that began in mountain forests could slowly pass through markets, farms, and caravan stops, carried beside grain, cloth, metal tools, and stories. Along the way, apples met other apples. This is one reason their history becomes so rich. In Europe, apples came into contact with local wild species, including the European crabapple, called Malus sylvestris. In other regions, they crossed with other wild relatives. Crossing means pollen from one kind of apple or apple relative fertilizes the flower of another. The seeds that form from that meeting carry a new genetic mix. So as apples traveled, they did not stay fixed. They changed. A seed planted near a village might grow into a tree with fruit unlike either parent. One tree might produce small, sour apples that stored well through winter. Another might produce larger fruit with softer flesh. Another might make apples good for pressing into juice. Another might survive a colder climate or resist a local disease better than nearby trees. People would notice. They might keep the better trees. They might plant more seeds from them. They might share fruit or cut branches from trees that seemed useful. Before modern science, this was still a form of selection. It was careful watching. It was tasting, remembering, planting, and choosing. The apple became a companion of settled life because it offered food that could last. Fresh apples could be eaten in season. Some varieties could be stored in cool cellars for months. Others could be dried, cooked, baked, pressed into cider, or turned into vinegar. In places with long winters, that mattered. A tree that produced reliable fruit could help carry sweetness into colder months. So apples were not only beautiful, they were practical. They could stand near a farmhouse for decades. They could bloom every spring and give fruit again in late summer or autumn. They could become part of a family's land, a village's food, or a region's identity. But every time people planted apple seeds, they were also accepting surprise. A seed from a good apple did not guarantee another good apple. It could become something better. It could become something worse. It could become something strange. This made apples different from a simple crop that repeats more predictably. Each seed was a small experiment. Each new tree was a new possibility. And over many generations, those possibilities gathered into the wide world of apples people know today. The roads carried apples across continents, but the seeds carried variation. And inside that variation was the reason apples could become so many colors, flavors, and forms. The journey across the world was only part of the story. The deeper mystery was hidden inside each seed, where no one could know exactly what kind of apple tree would grow. Inside the apple seed, the surprise continues. A seed looks simple from the outside. Small, brown, smooth, hard enough to press between the fingers. But inside it is a new genetic mixture. It is not a tiny copy of the apple that held it. It is not a sealed promise that the same fruit will return. This is one of the strangest and most important things about apples. If a person eats a Honeycrisp apple and saves one of the seeds, that seed will not reliably grow into another Honeycrisp tree. It may grow into an apple tree, but the fruit could be smaller, softer, sharper, less sweet, greener, redder, earlier to ripen, later to ripen, good for cider, poor for eating fresh, or simply ordinary in a way no one would choose to name. The reason is that apples reproduce through genetic mixing. The apple tree that grew the fruit provides one set of genetic instructions. But the pollen that fertilized the flower usually came from another apple variety nearby. That pollen provides another set. When they join, the seed receives a new combination. In this way, an apple seed is more like a child than a copy. A child may resemble a parent, but is not identical. The same is true for apple seeds. Each seed inside one core may be different from the others. One apple can hold several seeds, and each seed may carry its own possible tree. The apple on the outside may look like one finished fruit, but inside, it may hold several different genetic futures. This is why apple growing from seed has always carried uncertainty. A farmer could plant seeds from a wonderful apple and wait years for the trees to mature. Many apple trees take several years before they produce their first good crop. Some may take 5 years or more, depending on the variety, root system, and growing conditions. After all that waiting, the fruit may not match the apple that inspired the planting. It may not taste good at all. This was not a failure of the seed. It was the natural result of how apples reproduce. In the wild, this variation is useful. A forest does not need every young tree to be sweet to humans. It needs diversity. Some seedlings may survive colder winters. Some may handle drought better. Some may resist a disease that harms nearby trees. Some may make fruit that certain animals prefer. Some may fail. Variation gives a species more ways to meet an uncertain world. But for people, variation created a problem. Humans often want a fruit to repeat. If an apple is crisp, sweet, fragrant, and beautiful, people want that exact apple again. They want the same flavor in the next orchard, the same texture, the same harvest time, the same red skin, the same reliable crop. Seeds do not give that kind of certainty. This is why named apples are so special. A Honeycrisp is not just any apple that happens to be sweet and crisp. It is a specific genetic individual that was developed through breeding and released by the University of Minnesota in the 1990s. A Granny Smith traces back to a seedling found in Australia in the 1800s. A Macintosh traces back to a tree discovered in Ontario, Canada, in the early 1800s. Each famous variety began as one particular tree with one particular genetic mix. That tree made fruit people valued enough to preserve, but its seeds could not be trusted to repeat it. This makes the apple world feel almost delicate. Every named variety began as an accident, a choice, or a discovery. Somewhere, a seed grew into a tree. Someone tasted the fruit. Someone noticed it was worth keeping. But keeping it required more than planting its seeds. The exact tree had to be copied in another way, because the seed was always moving forward into difference, always making something new. The apple in the hand may have a familiar name on a sticker: Fuji, Gala, Honeycrisp, Granny Smith. But the seeds inside it are not carrying that name in a simple way. They are carrying possibility. They are carrying mixture. They are carrying the old wild habit of apples to change with every generation. And that quiet fact leads to one of the most important human tricks in the history of fruit. To keep the apple people loved, growers had to learn how to copy the tree itself. To copy an apple, Growers do not usually start with a seed. They start with a piece of a tree, a small cutting from a known apple variety can hold the exact living instructions of that tree. This cutting is called a scion. A scion may look simple, just a short piece of young branch with a few buds along it. But if it came from a honeycrisp tree, it carries honeycrisp. If it came from a Macintosh tree, it carries Macintosh. If it came from a Granny Smith tree, it carries Granny Smith. The scion is then joined to another plant part called the rootstock. The rootstock provides the roots and the lower trunk. Together, the scion and rootstock become one living tree. This is grafting. It is a careful joining of two plant pieces so their living layers touch, heal together, and grow as one. The most important layer is the cambium. The cambium is a thin green living layer just beneath the bark. It makes new wood and new inner bark as the tree grows. For a graft to work, the cambium of the scion and the cambium of the rootstock must line up closely. Then the cut surfaces conceal. New tissue forms between them. Water can move upward, sugars can move downward, and the borrowed branch begins to live on a new set of roots. It is a quiet kind of copying, not copying like making a drawing of an apple. Copying by keeping the same living plant alive in a new place. This means the fruit stays true to the original variety. A honeycrisp tree in one orchard and a honeycrisp tree in another orchard are not separate seedlings that happen to taste alike. They are living copies of the same genetic variety. The same is true for many named apples. Gala, Fuji, Pink Lady, Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, Macintosh. Their names do not describe a general type grown from seed. They describe specific varieties kept going by grafting. In a way, each named apple is a living line, a tree discovered or bred once, then repeated through cuttings again and again. Some of these lines have traveled across countries. Some have lasted for more than a century. The Macintosh apple, for example, began from a seedling found by John Macintosh in Ontario in the early 1800s. The original tree eventually died, but the variety continued because people grafted it. Without grafting, that apple would have disappeared with one tree. Rootstock adds another layer to the story. It is not only a support system, it can shape how the tree behaves. Some rootstocks make apple trees grow tall and broad. Others keep them small, sometimes only a few meters high, so growers can harvest more easily. Dwarf rootstocks help create compact orchard trees that bear fruit sooner than full-size seedling trees. A large apple tree grown on its own roots may take many years to produce heavily. A tree on certain dwarfing rootstocks may begin producing fruit much earlier. Rootstock can also influence disease resistance, cold tolerance, anchoring strength, and how well the tree handles different soils. This is why modern orchards are not just collections of apple varieties. They are combinations. A chosen top joined to a chosen root. The scion decides what apple grows. The rootstock helps decide how the tree lives. The joining point can often be seen near the base of a young grafted apple tree. It may look like a small bend, knob, scar, or change in bark texture just above the soil. That mark is the place where two plant histories became one trunk. It is easy to miss. But without that quiet seam, the apple world would be far less predictable. growers would plant seeds and wait for surprises. Some good, many ordinary, some not useful at all. Grafting gave humans a way to hold on to the rare discoveries. The unusually crisp fruit, the long-keeping fruit, the apple that baked well, the apple that pressed into good cider, the apple with the right balance of sweetness and tartness. Once people could copy a tree, they could name it, share it, trade it, plant it in new orchards, and keep it alive long after the original branch was gone. And from that simple act of joining wood to wood, the apple became not one fruit, but a world of preserved favorites, each with its own name, season, color, and purpose. Once apple trees could be copied by grafting, the apple world became much wider. A good fruit did not have to vanish with one tree. It could be named, it could be shared, it could be planted again in another orchard, another valley, another country. Over time, people kept thousands of apple varieties alive this way. More than 7,500 named kinds are often listed around the world. Some are famous. Some are old and rare. Some grow only in certain regions. Some are kept by small orchards, collectors, or families who remember a tree from a farm, a village, or a backyard. But the modern grocery store shows only a narrow part of that world. Most shoppers see familiar names like Gala, Fuji, Granny Smith, Honeycrisp, Golden Delicious, Red Delicious, or Pink Lady. These apples are not there by accident. They are chosen because they fit the needs of modern food systems. They can be picked in large amounts. They can handle packing and shipping. They can sit in storage. They can look bright and familiar under store lights. They can arrive at the shelf firm enough to be sold. That does not make them unimportant. It only means they are the apples that work well in a long chain, from orchard to truck to warehouse to store. Beyond that chain, the apple world becomes much stranger and more varied. Some apples are tiny and sharp. Some are rough-skinned, russeted, and brownish gold, with a dry texture that looks less shiny, but may carry a rich nutty flavor. Russeting means the skin has a rough, corky surface instead of a smooth shine. Some apples are striped red and yellow. Some are nearly black-red in deep sunlight. Some are pale green even when ripe. Some have flesh that is white, cream-colored, yellow, or even pinkish inside. Some apples are best eaten fresh from the hand. A fresh eating apple is usually crisp, juicy, and balanced enough to enjoy raw. Honeycrisp became famous for this because its large cells break open with a strong snap, releasing juice quickly. Fuji is often sweet and dense. Gala is usually mild, sweet, and easy to eat. Granny Smith is bright green and sharply tart, with enough firmness to feel clean and crisp. But not every apple is meant to be eaten that way. Some apples are better for baking. A good baking apple should hold its shape under heat, or soften in a useful way, without turning watery too soon. Granny Smith is often used in pies because its tartness balances sugar, and its firm flesh can stand up to baking. Bramley, an old English cooking apple, is very tart and breaks down well for sauces and fillings. In a warm oven, the apple's cells soften, pectin changes, and steam rises from the fruit. Pectin is a natural plant fiber that helps give fruit structure. As heat works through the slices, the apple becomes tender, fragrant, and sweet in a different way than when it was raw. Some apples are grown for cider. Cider apples can taste strange if eaten fresh. They may be bitter, dry, sour, or strongly tannic. Tannins are plant compounds that create a puckering feeling in the mouth, like strong black tea. That dryness may not be pleasant in a snack apple, but it can give cider body and depth. Cider makers often blend different apples. Sweet apples bring sugar. Sharp apples bring acid. Bitter sharp or bittersweet apples bring tannins and stronger flavor. A cider apple and a lunchbox apple may both belong to the same species, Malus domestica, but they serve very different purposes. Other apples are valued because they store well. Before modern refrigeration, this mattered deeply. A family could harvest apples in autumn and keep certain varieties through winter in a cool cellar. Storage apples often have firm flesh, thicker skin, and flavors that may improve after weeks or months. Some apples taste harsh right off the tree, then become sweeter and more balanced as starches change into sugars during storage. So an apple variety is not just a color or a name. It is a purpose, a season, a texture, a use, a small solution to a human need. Fresh eating, baking, pressing, drying, storing, selling, sharing. The apple family stretches from polished supermarket fruit to old orchard varieties with forgotten names. And all that variety gathers into one familiar moment, the bite. Because after all the names, colors, and uses, the mouth still notices something simple first. Some apples snap cleanly and flood with juice. Others soften almost quietly between the teeth. The difference begins inside the flesh itself. A crisp apple and a soft apple may look almost the same from the outside. Both may be round. Both may be red, green, yellow, or streaked with color. Both may feel firm in the hand. But when the teeth press into the skin, the inside tells the truth. Some apples break with a clean snap. The sound is sharp and bright. Juice gathers at the bite. The flesh seems to split apart in tiny bursts. Other apples give way more quietly. They bend, they crush. They feel mealy, soft, or dry, even if they are still safe to eat. That difference comes from the structure of the apple's cells. Apple flesh is made of millions of tiny plant cells packed together. Each cell is like a little water-filled room with a thin wall around it. The wall helps hold the shape. The water inside creates pressure. That pressure is called turgor. Turgor simply means the cell is full enough to push outward against its wall. When many cells are full of water and pressed tightly together, the apple feels firm. When the teeth bite down, those full cells rupture. They break open. Their juice is released. That clean breaking is part of what creates the crisp feeling. A fresh apple is not just hard. It is full of tiny cells breaking in a clear, sudden way. The sound of the bite comes from those cells cracking and separating. It is a small fracture event happening inside fruit flesh. A Honeycrisp apple is famous for this. It was developed at the University of Minnesota and released in the 1990s. Part of its appeal comes from its unusually large cells and the way those cells break open when bitten. That is why a good Honeycrisp can feel almost explosive compared with a softer apple. The bite does not just press the flesh flat, it shatters it gently. A softer apple behaves differently. Over time, the cell walls can weaken. The materials that glue the cells together can break down. One important material is pectin. Pectin helps plant cells stick to one another and gives fruit structure. As apples ripen or age in storage, pectin can change. The cells may stop holding together as tightly. Instead of cracking cleanly, they slide, bend, or collapse. This is one reason an older apple can feel mealy. Mealy flesh often happens when cells separate without bursting open fully. The apple may still have water inside, but the bite feels dry because the juice does not flood out in the same way. The water stays trapped in cells that pull apart instead of snapping open. Temperature matters too. A chilled apple often feels crisper than a warm one. Cold can make the flesh seem firmer and can slow the processes that soften fruit. That is why apples are often stored cold after harvest. A cool apple from the refrigerator may give a brighter snap than the same apple left warm on a counter. The skin also plays a role. Apple skin is thin, but it adds tension. When the teeth first break through it, there is a tiny moment of resistance. Then the flesh underneath gives way. A thicker or tougher skin can make the first bite feel different, even if the flesh inside is similar. This is why texture is not one thing. It is skin, cell walls, water pressure, ripeness, storage time, temperature, and variety all working together. The crunch of an apple is a physical event. It is the fruit structure being tested. It is water pressure released from tiny cells. It is the sound of plant tissue breaking apart. And because the mouth hears and feels that break at the same time, crispness becomes part of flavor before the sweetness is even fully noticed. A crisp apple can seem fresher because the bite is loud, juicy, and clean. A soft apple can seem older because the bite is quiet and dry. The tongue notices texture. The ears notice the snap. The teeth notice resistance. And as the apple breaks open, scent begins to rise from the torn flesh. The bite has opened the fruit. Now the apple is no longer just something felt. It is something tasted, smelled, and understood through the quiet chemistry of flavor. It is easy to think flavor lives only on the tongue. But an apple's flavor is more than sweetness. It is more than sourness. It is more than the juice released by the bite. Flavor is built from several signals arriving together. The tongue notices sugar and acid. The nose notices scent. The teeth notice texture. The ears may even notice the crisp sound of the flesh breaking. The brain gathers all of this and turns it into one simple feeling. This apple tastes fresh. This apple tastes sharp. This apple tastes sweet. This apple tastes almost like honey, flowers, grass, or pear. The sweetness of an apple comes mostly from natural sugars. As the fruit ripens, starch inside the apple can change into sugars such as fructose, glucose, and sucrose. Fructose is especially sweet, and apples can contain a noticeable amount of it. This is why a ripe apple often tastes sweeter than one picked too early. But sugar alone does not create the full flavor. A glass of plain sugar water can be sweet, but it does not taste like an apple. The apple needs balance. That balance often comes from acid. The main acid in apples is called malic acid. Its name comes from malus, the apple genus. Malic acid gives apples much of their bright tartness. It is the clean, sharp taste in a Granny Smith. It is the little spark that keeps a sweet apple from tasting flat. A very sweet apple with low acid can taste mild and soft. A high acid apple can taste lively, sour, and refreshing. When sugar and acid are balanced well, the apple feels complete. Sweetness gives comfort. Tartness gives brightness. Together, they create the taste people often describe as crisp, fresh, or juicy, even before thinking about the actual texture. Different apple varieties hold different balances. A Fuji apple is often very sweet, dense, and mild. A Gala is usually sweet with a gentle flavor. A Granny Smith is tart, green, and sharp. A Macintosh can taste aromatic and softer, with a flavor many people connect to old orchards, cider, or applesauce. A Honeycrisp often combines strong sweetness with enough acid to feel clean and bright. These differences are not just opinions. They come from measurable amounts of sugar, acid, water, and aroma compounds inside the fruit. Aroma compounds are tiny molecules that can float into the air and reach the nose. When an apple is whole, some of those scents stay sealed under the skin. When the apple is bitten or sliced, cells break open and more aroma escapes. That is why a fresh bite can smell stronger than an untouched apple. Some apple aromas are fruity, some are floral, some are green and grassy, some seem honey-like, spicy, or almost pear-like. Certain compounds called esters can give apples fruity, sweet, or pear-like notes. Other compounds can create greener scents, like fresh leaves or cut grass. The mix changes by variety, ripeness, storage time, and even growing conditions. Sunlight, temperature, soil, harvest timing, and storage all help shape the final flavor. This is why two apples with the same name can sometimes taste slightly different. One may have grown in a warmer season. One may have ripened longer on the tree. One may have spent more time in cold storage. One may have developed stronger aroma before it reached the hand. Texture changes flavor too. A crisp apple can seem juicier and fresher because the cells burst open cleanly. A soft apple can taste duller, even if its sugar level is similar. The tongue receives the same basic tastes, but the whole experience feels different. The snap, the juice, the scent, and the tartness all work together. An apple is not one flavor. It is a small arrangement of chemistry and structure. Sugar gives it sweetness. Malic acid gives it brightness. Aroma gives it character. Texture gives it life in the mouth. The flavor feels calm and complete in the moment of a fresh bite. But the moment the skin is broken and the pale flesh meets the air, the apple begins to change. The same cells that release sweetness and scent now open themselves to oxygen. And slowly, quietly, the cut surface starts to turn brown. The pale flesh of a fresh apple looks clean at first. Creamy white, light yellow, sometimes almost snowy depending on the variety. For a few moments after the apple is sliced, the surface may seem unchanged. The cut edge shines with juice. The cells are open. The scent is stronger. Then, little by little, the color begins to shift. A faint tan appears. Then a warmer brown. The change may start near the edges where the knife passed through, or it may spread across the flat surface of a slice sitting on a plate. This browning is not dirt. It is not rot. It is chemistry. When an apple is whole, many of its inner compounds are kept apart inside tiny living cells. The skin helps protect the fruit. The cell walls help separate different materials. But when the apple is cut, crushed, or bitten, those cells break open. Oxygen from the air can now reach places it could not reach before. Inside the apple are plant compounds called polyphenols. Polyphenols are natural chemicals found in many plants. They can help with color, defense, and protection. Apples, tea, berries, cocoa, and many fruits contain them. Inside the apple, there are also enzymes. An enzyme is a small biological helper that speeds up a chemical reaction. The main enzyme involved in apple browning is called polyphenol oxidase. Its name sounds long, but the idea is simple. It helps oxygen react with polyphenols. When oxygen, polyphenols, and polyphenol oxidase meet on the cut surface, new brown-colored compounds begin to form. These compounds are part of what creates the familiar brown shade on an exposed apple slice. The same general kind of browning can happen in other fruits and vegetables too. Bananas darken after bruising. Avocados turn brown after being opened. Potatoes can darken after being cut. The details differ from food to food, but the pattern is similar. Damage opens cells. Oxygen gets in. Enzymes begin their work. Color changes. The browning does not mean the apple instantly becomes unsafe. A slightly browned apple slice is usually still edible. It may look less fresh. It may taste a little different. Its texture may dry slightly on the surface. But the color itself is mostly a sign that the apple's own chemistry is reacting with air. This is why browning can be slowed, but not always stopped completely. Lemon juice is a common way to slow it down. Lemon juice is acidic, meaning it has a low pH. That acidity makes it harder for polyphenol oxidase to work well. The enzyme prefers certain conditions. An acid pushes the surface away from those conditions. Lemon juice also contains vitamin C, also called ascorbic acid, which can help slow browning reactions. So when apple slices are dipped in lemon water, they often stay pale longer. The lemon is not freezing time. It is simply making the reaction less comfortable for the enzyme. Cold can slow browning too. A slice kept in the refrigerator usually changes more slowly than one left in a warm room. That is because many chemical reactions happen faster in warmth and slower in cold. Covering apple slices can also help a little, because less oxygen reaches the surface. Some people place slices in water for a short time. Others use salt water, honey water, or citrus juice. Each method works by changing the conditions around the cut fruit. Less oxygen, more acid, lower temperature, a surface that dries more slowly. The simple browning slice shows that an apple is not just a still object. Even after it leaves the tree, even after it is picked, washed, sold, and cut, it still carries active chemistry inside it. Its cells may no longer be growing the way they did on the branch, but the fruit has not become lifeless in the way a stone is lifeless. It is still changing. Its surface reacts. Its aroma shifts. Its flesh softens. Its sugars and acids continue to settle into new balances over time. The brown edge of an apple slice is a quiet signal of exposure. The inside has met the outside. The protected flesh has met the air. And once that meeting begins, the apple starts telling another part of its story. Not just how it tastes when fresh, but how fruit continues to change after harvest, after cutting, and during the slow process called ripening. Ripening is one of the quiet ways fruit keeps changing. An apple may look still in a bowl. It may sit on a counter without moving. It may rest in a paper bag, a wooden crate, or a cool storage room. But inside, the fruit is still active. Its cells are still carrying out chemical changes. Its firmness can shift. Its aroma can grow stronger. Its skin color can deepen. Its starch can slowly change into sugar. One of the important signals behind these changes is ethylene. Ethylene is a natural plant hormone. A hormone is a chemical message. In animals, hormones move through the body and help guide growth, hunger, sleep, stress, and many other processes. In plants, hormones help guide growth, flowering, root development, leaf drop, fruit ripening, and aging. Ethylene is unusual because it is a gas. It can drift through air in tiny amounts. A ripening apple releases ethylene from its own tissues. That gas can then affect the same fruit, and sometimes other fruits nearby. This is why people often say that one ripe fruit can help ripen others. The idea is real, though the effect depends on the fruit, the temperature, the airflow, and how ripe everything already is. Apples, bananas, pears, peaches, tomatoes, and avocados are all examples of fruits that respond strongly to ethylene. They are called climacteric fruits. That means they go through a ripening stage where respiration rises. Respiration is the process of using stored energy, almost like slow breathing at the cell level. During this stage, the fruit's chemistry becomes more active. Ethylene helps coordinate the change. A green banana placed near apples may yellow faster because it is sensitive to ethylene. A ripe apple sealed in a bag with other fruit can create a small pocket of that gas. The air inside the bag becomes part of the ripening environment. In an orchard, ethylene helps fruit move toward maturity. In storage, growers often try to manage it carefully. Too much ethylene too soon can make apples soften faster. Too little ripening can leave fruit hard, sour, or flat. So the apple's timing matters. As an apple ripens, several things happen together. Starch inside the fruit begins changing into sugars. That can make the apple taste sweeter. Acids may slowly decrease, which can make the flavor feel less sharp. Aroma compounds increase, giving the apple more scent. The skin may change color as chlorophyll breaks down, and other pigments become more visible. A green background may become yellow. A red blush may deepen where sunlight and variety allow it. The flesh can also soften as cell walls and pectin change. Pectin is part of the structure that helps plant cells hold together. When pectin changes, the apple may lose some crispness. This is why ripeness is a balance. An underripe apple may be hard, starchy, pale, and weak in aroma. A perfectly ripe apple may be sweet, fragrant, juicy, and crisp. An overripe apple may become soft, mealy, dull, or bruised more easily. The same fruit passes through these stages slowly, even if the changes are not easy to see at first. A bowl of apples on a table is not frozen in time. It is a group of fruits releasing faint chemical messages into the air. One apple may be farther along than another. One may have a bruise that speeds local softening. One may hold its firmness longer because of its variety. Some apples are naturally better at long storage. Others are best eaten soon after harvest, when their scent and texture are at their brightest. The old advice to keep apples away from some other produce comes from this ethylene effect. Leafy greens, broccoli, carrots, and some other foods can age faster or change quality when exposed to ethylene. A crisp vegetable may yellow or lose freshness sooner if stored too close to ethylene-producing fruit. So even inside a refrigerator drawer, fruits and vegetables can quietly affect one another. The apple is still communicating, not with sound, but with chemistry. Its ripening signal is invisible. No color, no voice, no movement the eye can follow. Only a gas released in tiny amounts, guiding changes in sweetness, scent, firmness, and color. And this makes the fresh-looking apple at the store more surprising. If apples release ripening signals, soften with time, and keep changing after harvest, how can they stay crisp and bright for months after leaving the tree? The answer begins in cold rooms, careful air, and the strange art of slowing a fruit almost to sleep. The strange art is not stopping the apple completely. It is slowing it down. After harvest, an apple is still breathing in its own quiet way. It takes in oxygen. It releases carbon dioxide. It uses stored energy inside its cells. This process is called respiration. It is not breathing with lungs, of course. It is the slow chemical use of food inside living cells. The faster an apple respires, the faster it moves through its stored energy. The faster it moves through that energy, the sooner it softens, loses crispness, and changes flavor. So growers and storage workers try to make the apple's inner clock run slowly. The first tool is cold. Many apples are stored just above freezing, often near 0 to 4 degrees Celsius, or about 32 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold slows the chemical reactions inside the fruit. It also slows the growth of many microbes that could cause decay. A cold apple is not frozen. Its cells are still alive, but their activity is reduced. The fruit is awake only in the faintest way. In large apple-growing regions, harvest often comes in late summer or autumn. Bins of apples are brought from orchards into packing houses and storage buildings. The fruit may be washed, sorted, graded, and placed into rooms designed to hold thousands or even millions of apples. Some rooms are simple cold storage. Others are much more controlled. These are called controlled atmosphere storage rooms. The name sounds complex, but the idea is easy to picture. The apple is placed in a cold sealed room, and the air around it is changed. Normal air contains about 21% oxygen. In controlled atmosphere storage, the oxygen level can be lowered, sometimes to only 1 to 3%. Carbon dioxide can be raised or carefully held at a set level. Humidity is managed so the apples do not dry out too quickly. Temperature is kept steady. Ethylene, the ripening gas, may be monitored or removed. The room becomes a carefully balanced pocket of air. Not too warm, not too dry, not too much oxygen, not too much ripening signal. Inside that room, the apple's respiration slows. It uses its stored sugars more slowly. It softens more slowly. Its acids, aromas, and texture change at a gentler pace. This is why an apple picked in September or October can sometimes appear in a store many months later, still looking bright, firm, and fresh. The fruit has not been made new. It has been held back from changing too quickly. In a way, controlled atmosphere storage creates a long artificial autumn. The apple has left the tree. The leaves have fallen. The orchard may be bare under winter air, but inside the storage room, the fruit remains in a cool pause. Rows of bins sit quietly in low light. Fans move air. Sensors track oxygen and carbon dioxide. Workers may not open the room often because opening it changes the atmosphere inside. When the door finally opens, the apples return to ordinary air. Their pace begins to rise again. They are sorted, packed, shipped, and placed where people can find them. This system has changed the way people experience apples. In the past, many apples were strongly seasonal. Some were eaten right after harvest. Some were stored in cellars. Some were dried, pressed, cooked, or preserved. Winter apples were prized because they could last. Modern storage extends that old idea with much more precision. Instead of a cool cellar under a farmhouse, there may be a sealed commercial room where oxygen is measured carefully and temperature barely shifts. This does not mean every apple stores the same way. Some varieties hold crispness for a long time. Others are better soon after harvest. A Honeycrisp, a Fuji, a Gala, and a Macintosh do not all respond to storage in exactly the same way. Their skin, flesh, acids, sugars, and cell structure all affect how well they last. That is why variety matters even after the apple is picked. The fresh-looking apple on a grocery shelf may have passed through months of quiet management. It may have hung on a branch in early autumn. It may have rested in a cold, low-oxygen room through winter. It may have traveled by truck in a chilled container. And still, when it reaches the hand, it can feel simple. Smooth skin, firm weight, a little scent near the stem. But now that simplicity feels different. The apple has been shaped by time, then protected from time. It has carried sunlight, water, air, and storage into one small piece of food. And when the first bite is taken, that long-held fruit finally becomes part of the body that eats it. When the apple is eaten, its long journey changes form again. The fruit that began as a flower, swelled on a branch, gathered sunlight, and rested in storage now becomes food. A medium apple may feel solid in the hand, but most of it is water. Around 80 to 85% of an apple is water, depending on the variety and growing conditions. That water is held inside millions of tiny plant cells. It gives the apple its weight. It helps carry its juice. It makes the bite feel fresh instead of dry. Along with water, the apple brings natural sugars. These sugars are not added from outside. They formed as the fruit ripened and starch changed slowly into sweeter forms. Fructose, glucose, and sucrose all help shape the apple's sweetness. A medium apple may contain about 90 to 100 calories, mostly from these natural carbohydrates. But the apple is not only sugar and water, it also carries fiber. A medium apple with the skin left on can provide about 4 grams of fiber. Fiber is the part of plant food the body does not fully break down like sugar or starch. Instead, it moves through digestion more slowly. It adds bulk. It helps the food feel more filling. And it gives the apple a different kind of value than juice alone. This is one reason eating a whole apple is different from drinking apple juice. Juice may carry sweetness and flavor, but much of the fiber is left behind when the fruit is pressed and filtered. The whole apple keeps more of its structure. The flesh, the skin, and the tiny plant cell walls all arrive together. One important kind of apple fiber is pectin. Pectin is a soluble fiber, which means it can mix with water and form a soft gel-like texture. It is the same natural substance that helps jams and jellies set. Inside the apple, pectin helps give the fruit shape. Inside the body, it moves more gently through digestion. It does not act like a dramatic medicine. It is simply part of the quiet structure of the fruit. A small, useful plant material that travels with the bite. Apples also contain vitamin C, though not in huge amounts compared with fruits like oranges or strawberries. Vitamin C helps protect cells and supports normal body function. A medium apple may offer a modest amount, enough to contribute, but not enough to make the apple a vitamin C powerhouse. The apple's strength is not in one single nutrient. It is in the combination. Water, fiber, natural sugar, acid, skin, plant compounds. A food that is simple, portable, and built by a tree. The skin is especially interesting. Many people peel apples for pies, sauces, or softer eating. But the skin holds a rich share of the fruit's plant compounds. These include polyphenols. Polyphenols are natural chemicals that plants make for many reasons. Some help with color. Some help protect against sunlight. Some help defend against insects, fungi, and stress. In red apples, some of the color comes from anthocyanins, a group of polyphenols also found in blueberries and red grapes. Other apple polyphenols include compounds such as quercetin, which is found in many plant foods. The names can sound complex, but the idea is simple. The apple skin is not just a wrapper. It is active plant tissue. It helped protect the fruit while it grew outside in wind, rain, sun, and the presence of living things that might feed on it. When that skin is eaten, some of those plant compounds come with it. This does not make the apple magical. It makes it biological. A real fruit with the marks of real growth. The body receives what the tree built. Water pulled from soil. Carbon from air. Sugar made in leaves. Fiber formed in cell walls. pigments shaped by sunlight, protective compounds gathered in the skin. Each bite is ordinary and specific at the same time. The apple does not need to be rare to be meaningful. Its value is partly in how quietly common it is. It can be eaten fresh, carried in a bag, sliced beside a meal, baked into softness, or shared without ceremony. But the body is only one part of the apple's story. Before the fruit ever reached the hand, it belonged to a wider living place. A place of soil, roots, insects, fungi, birds, weather, blossoms, and careful human work. The apple feeds the body, but the orchard feeds the apple. The orchard feeds the apple in more ways than one. It is easy to picture an orchard as rows of trees, aisles of grass, branches held in careful shapes, fruit hanging in late summer light. But an orchard is not only a planting of trees. It is a living system. Every apple depends on many small conditions coming together. The soil must hold enough water, but not stay soaked for too long. The roots need air spaces underground. The leaves need sunlight. The blossoms need pollinators. The branches need pruning so light and air can reach through the canopy. And the fruit needs protection from damage, disease, and weather. Pruning is one of the quiet arts of orchard care. A grower may remove certain branches in winter or early spring before the tree fully wakes. This helps shape the tree. It can keep branches from crowding one another. It can let sunlight reach fruit deeper inside the tree. It can improve airflow, which helps leaves and fruit dry faster after rain. That matters because many apple diseases spread more easily when leaves and fruit stay wet for long periods. One common apple disease is apple scab. It is caused by a fungus called Venturia inequalis. The fungus can create dark, rough spots on leaves and fruit. It does not usually make the apple dangerous to eat, but it can weaken the tree and make the fruit less marketable. Another disease, fire blight, is caused by bacteria. It can make blossoms, shoots, and branches look scorched, almost as if touched by flame. Growers watch carefully for these problems because a healthy orchard is always balancing growth with risk. Fungi are not always enemies, though. Soil fungi can help break down fallen leaves, old wood, and plant material, returning nutrients to the ground. Some fungi form relationships near roots and help plants access water or minerals more effectively. The orchard floor is full of life too small to notice at first glance. Bacteria, fungi, worms, beetles, and other tiny organisms help turn old leaves and fruit into soil. That soil then supports the roots that support the tree that supports the apple. Insects also play more than one role. Bees help pollinate blossoms in spring. Lady beetles can feed on aphids, which are small sap-sucking insects. Parasitic wasps, many of them tiny and harmless to people, can lay eggs in pests and help keep their numbers down. But other insects can damage apples. Codling moth larvae can tunnel into fruit. Aphids can curl leaves and weaken new growth. Apple maggot flies can lay eggs under the skin of the fruit, leaving trails inside as the larvae feed. An orchard is peaceful to look at, but it is full of quiet interactions. Some creatures help, some harm, some do both, depending on timing and number. Birds may eat insects that damage trees. they may also peck ripe fruit. Deer may browse young shoots. Mice and voles may chew bark near the base of trees in winter. A single tree is part of many appetites. Water shapes the orchard as much as any living thing. Too little water can slow fruit growth and stress the tree. Too much water can reduce oxygen around the roots and invite disease. In dry regions, irrigation may be used to give trees measured water through sprinklers or drip lines. Drip irrigation sends water slowly near the roots, helping reduce waste. Sunlight is just as important. A shaded apple may stay smaller, greener, or less sweet. A sunlit apple may develop stronger red color depending on the variety. That is why tree spacing, pruning, and branch angle matter. The shape of the tree affects the fruit. The space between branches affects the flavor. The open air around a leaf can change the quality of an apple months later. So the orchard is not a simple factory. It is a managed ecosystem, a place where humans guide nature without fully controlling it. Growers can prune, plant, water, protect, and harvest. But they still work with frost, rain, heat, insects, fungi, soil, and bloom time. Every apple comes from that partnership. And when harvest finally arrives, the fruit is not only taken from the tree, it is carried into many possible futures. Some apples will be eaten fresh. Some will be baked. Some will be dried. Some will be pressed until their juice runs out. And the quiet orchard becomes something liquid, fragrant, and transformed. When apples leave the tree, their story can divide into many paths. Some stay whole. Some are washed, sorted, and packed into boxes. Some are sliced thin and dried until their water fades away. Some are peeled, chopped, and cooked into sauce. Some soften inside pies, where heat turns firm slices tender and fragrant. Some are baked whole until their skins wrinkle and their flesh sinks into sweetness. And some apples are pressed. Pressing changes the fruit in a very direct way. The apple is no longer kept round. It is crushed until its cells break open. The juice that once sat inside millions of tiny water-filled chambers begins to run out. At first, the apples may be washed and sorted. Then they are ground into a rough pulp called pomace. Pomace is the crushed mixture of apple flesh, skin, seeds, and bits of core. It may look coarse and pale, like a damp mash of broken fruit. Then pressure is applied. Slowly, the juice drains away from the solids. What was once a crisp apple becomes a cloudy liquid carrying sugar, acid, aroma, and color from the fruit. Fresh apple juice can taste bright and sweet almost immediately. But cider adds another layer. In many places, the word cider can mean fresh pressed apple juice. In other places, especially when people say hard cider, it means fermented apple juice. Fermentation is a process where microorganisms, usually yeasts, feed on sugars and turn them into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Yeast is a tiny living fungus. It is too small to see as a single cell without a microscope. But in a barrel, bottle, or tank of apple juice, yeast can slowly change the whole liquid. The sugars that made the apple sweet become fuel. As the yeast works, the juice becomes less sugary. Alcohol forms. Bubbles may appear. New flavors develop. A fresh apple tastes like fruit. A fermented cider can taste dry, sharp, earthy, floral, sparkling, bitter, or warm. It depends on the apples, the yeast, the temperature, and the time. Cider makers often think about apples differently than someone choosing a snack. A perfect eating apple may not make the best cider by itself. It may be sweet and crisp, but too simple in juice. Cider often needs balance. Sweet apples bring sugar. Sharp apples bring acid. Bitter apples bring tannins. Aromatic apples bring scent. Tannins are plant compounds that create a dry, puckering feeling in the mouth, like strong tea. In fresh eating, too much tannin can seem harsh. In cider, tannin can give structure. It can make the drink feel fuller and more complex. This is why cider apples may look plain or taste difficult when eaten raw. Some are small, some are rough-skinned. Some are sour enough to make the mouth tighten. Some are bitter enough that a person might not take a second bite. But when blended and fermented, those same apples can become important. One variety may supply brightness. Another may supply body. Another may supply fragrance. The final cider is often not one apple speaking alone, but many apples working together. Apples can also become vinegar. If cider is exposed to the right bacteria and oxygen, alcohol can turn into acetic acid. That acid gives vinegar its sharp taste and preserving power. Apple cider vinegar begins as apple sugar, then yeast, then alcohol, then acid. A fruit that grew from a blossom can pass through several lives after harvest. Fresh fruit, juice, cider, vinegar, sauce, pie, dried rings. Each form keeps something from the original apple and changes something else. Drying removes water and concentrates sweetness. Cooking breaks down cell walls and softens the flesh. Pressing separates juice from structure. Fermentation lets tiny organisms reshape the sugars. The apple is useful because it can transform. It can be held in the hand, stored in a cellar, packed in a lunch, baked in an oven, or poured into a glass. But every one of those paths begins in the orchard, with flowers that survived spring, with bees that moved pollen, with leaves that made sugar, with roots that found water, and with weather gentle enough to let the fruit reach harvest. The apple can become many things after it is picked, but its future still depends on the trees that make it, and on the changing world those trees must keep growing in. The apple has always depended on timing. Not only the timing of harvest, not only the timing of bloom, but the slower timing of the whole year. An apple tree does not simply wait through winter by accident. It needs winter. During cold months, the tree enters dormancy. Dormancy is a resting state that helps the tree survive freezing weather and prepare for spring growth. The buds are already there on the branches, small and tight, holding the beginnings of future leaves and blossoms. But they do not open right away. They need a certain amount of cold first. Growers often call this winter chill. Winter chill is usually counted as hours spent in cool temperatures, often around 0 to 7 degrees Celsius, or about 32 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Different apple varieties need different amounts. Some need only a few hundred chill hours. Others may need 800, 1000 or more. This cold helps the tree reset. It helps the buds open more evenly when warmth returns. If winter is too warm, some trees may bloom unevenly. Some buds may open late. Some may open weakly. The orchard can lose the smooth rhythm that helps flowers, leaves, bees, and fruit all meet at the right time. But warmth is not the only problem. Spring can become risky in a different way. If warm days arrive too early, apple buds may begin to swell ahead of schedule. The tree may think spring has begun. Then a late frost can return. A flower bud that was safe while closed and dormant becomes more vulnerable as it opens. Once the soft flower parts are exposed, freezing temperatures can damage the tissue that would have become fruit. From a distance, the orchard may still look pale and lovely, but inside the blossoms, some of the future harvest may already be gone. A few cold hours at the wrong time can echo all the way into autumn. Heat later in the season can also shape the fruit. Apples need sunlight to develop sugar and color, but extreme heat can stress the tree. Leaves may lose water faster. Fruit may stop growing as well. Some apples can suffer sunburn when exposed fruit surfaces become too hot in direct light. The skin may turn pale, brown, or damaged on the sun-facing side. In dry seasons, drought can make the problem deeper. Roots may struggle to find enough moisture. Fruit size may be smaller. The tree may protect itself by slowing growth. If heavy rain follows a dry spell, some fruit may crack or swell unevenly. The apple depends on balance, and climate can disturb that balance in many quiet ways. Pollinators also follow timing. Bees become active when temperatures are warm enough and flowers are open. If apple blossoms open earlier than usual, but pollinators are slowed by cold, rain, or shifting seasonal patterns, the meeting between flower and insect can become less reliable. The flower may be ready, the bee may not be moving enough, or the best pollination days may pass under wind and rain. The apple's future can depend on a few mild days that line up just right. This does not mean apples will disappear. Apple trees are adaptable, and growers are careful observers. They can choose varieties with different chill needs. They can plant trees that bloom earlier or later. They can use rootstocks that help trees handle certain soils, sizes, or stresses. They can improve irrigation, add shade cloth in hot regions, protect young trunks, manage soil moisture, and adjust pruning so fruit is not overexposed. In some places, orchards may shift toward higher elevations, cooler valleys, or different regions. In others, old varieties may become less reliable, while new ones become more useful. The apple has changed before. It moved from wild forests in Central Asia to farms, gardens, roadsides, and orchards across the world. It survived through grafting, selection, storage, travel, and human care. But its future will still be tied to the world around it, to winter cold, to spring bloom, to bee flight, to summer water, to autumn ripening. The apple is not separate from weather. It is weather made round and sweet. And after following it through forests, flowers, roots, roads, storage rooms, and orchards, the small fruit in the hand begins to feel like a record of nearly everything that touched it. And now the apple can return to the hand. Simple again, round again, quiet again, but not quite the same as before. At the beginning, it may have seemed like only a familiar fruit. A red apple in a bowl, a green apple on a cutting board, a yellow apple resting in soft light. Something crisp, sweet, and easy to understand. But inside that simple shape is a long chain of hidden events. The color on its skin came from plant pigments. Red from anthocyanins, green from chlorophyll, yellow from carotenoids. The shade on one side may have been shaped by how sunlight touched it on the branch. The flavor inside came from sugar, malic acid, scent compounds, water, and texture meeting all at once. The crunch came from tiny water-filled cells breaking open cleanly beneath the teeth. The browning of a cut slice came from oxygen reaching open cells and enzymes beginning their quiet work. The apple has been chemistry all along, but it has also been biology. Inside the core are seeds, and each seed carries a new genetic mix, not a perfect copy of the apple that held it. That is why a Honeycrisp seed does not simply grow another Honeycrisp. It grows possibility, a new tree, a new combination, a fruit that may be sweet, sour, soft, sharp, small, strange, or forgotten. To keep the apples people love, growers learn to graft. A small branch from a known tree is joined to a rootstock, and the same variety can live again in another orchard. That is why a named apple can travel across years and countries, not by repeating through seed, but by being carefully copied as living wood. The apple has also been history. Its story reaches back to wild apple forests in Central Asia, especially near the Tian Shan Mountains of Kazakhstan. There, wild apples grew in many shapes, colors, and flavors long before supermarket shelves existed. Some were sweet, some were bitter, some were small and hard. Some were closer to the apples known today. Animals, weather, disease, and chance shaped those forests before human hands began choosing favorite fruit. Then apples moved along roads, farms, trade routes, and migration paths. The Silk Road helped carry them across regions, where they crossed with other wild relatives and became even more varied. The apple has been ecology too. It began as a blossom with 5 pale petals. That flower needed pollen. Often, it needed pollen from a different compatible variety. Bees and other pollinators moved through the orchard, carrying fine grains of pollen from flower to flower. A few cool, rainy, windy, or frosty days during bloom could change the harvest months later. The apple depended on timing. It depended on insects. It depended on spring holding itself gently enough for fruit to begin. Then the flower base swelled. The apple became a plum fruit, with much of the edible flesh growing from tissue around the ovary. Leaves gathered sunlight and turned carbon dioxide and water into sugar. Roots pulled moisture and minerals from the soil. The trunk lifted water upward. The bark protected the living layers beneath. The whole tree worked quietly to make one fruit possible. And after harvest, the apple kept changing. It released ethylene, a natural ripening gas. It softened, sweetened, colored, and aged. In controlled atmosphere storage, some apples were held for months in cold rooms where oxygen, carbon dioxide, humidity, and temperature were carefully managed. The apple on a store shelf may have been harvested long before it reached the hand, not frozen in time, but slowed. And when eaten, it became food, mostly water, natural sugar, fiber, pectin, a modest amount of vitamin C, and plant compounds gathered especially in the skin. It could be eaten fresh, baked, dried, cooked into sauce, pressed into juice, fermented into cider, or changed into vinegar. The apple is not only one thing. It is a fruit, a seed vessel, a stored season, a piece of orchard weather, a product of grafting, a memory of wild forests, and a small gift from a tree. So when the apple appears again, resting quietly in the hand, it carries more than sweetness. It carries blossoms and bees, roots and rain, sunlit leaves and cold storage rooms, ancient mountain forests and modern orchards, human care and natural chance. It is biology, chemistry, history, ecology, food, and memory gathered into one small round form. And maybe that is why the apple has stayed with people for so long. It is easy to carry, easy to share, easy to recognize. Yet the closer it is seen, the more it opens. Not loudly, not suddenly, but gently, like a fruit sliced across the middle, revealing the small star hidden inside. The apple returns to stillness now, a quiet shape, a soft weight, a simple thing made deeper by everything it has held. And the long story inside it can rest there too, in the skin, in the core, in the seeds, in the sweetness, in the memory of the tree.